I've listened to Stephen Quayle on one of the videos, and he has some very interesting things to say, and I wanted to play a little portion of that.
Different characteristics of being a recombinant virus slash bacterial release. And this is something that if you take H1N1, the normal symptoms that people get start with a sore throat, going into respiratory distress, etc. But this is totally avoiding the trachea, i.e. no sore throat, going to the lungs and hemorrhaging the lungs. It's a form of, I believe, genetically altered Spanish flu, 1918. And George, this is a critical story, especially from the fact that in August, about the 21st of August, a reported Mossad microbiologist by the name of Joseph Moshe called into a radio station, claimed he was Mossad and that the Ukrainian government was going to be releasing a biological agent, and then he was surrounded by police. They even took out some non-lethal weapons on him to disrupt all of his electronics, sprayed the guy with pepper spray. The whole thing was on a helicopter camera, and this is something that's fascinating. They can disavow Moshe all they want, but he called in August. We're now in November.
And it's happening.
And it's happening. So it's important for people to understand this, that we're not just talking now about the Ukraine. We're talking about Belarus, and we're talking about Norway, which is separated by literally thousands and thousands of miles. 20% of the Norwegian population now is infected, and the most striking and dramatic indictment that's out there is the World Health Organization and the CDC refuse to release.
Well, that kind of doesn't sound too good. It sounds like a conspiracy theory. But I think that there's a lot of important information that's not in the mainstream news. I think that this pneumonic plague, the chemtrails, the whole binary way of combining different ways of not only limiting but controlling the human population and depopulating, it's quite ingenious. It's quite intelligent. So it is quite disturbing as well. It should be quite disturbing, especially for you, those who are affected. But I think that everybody in the world is affected by all that's going on out there, and it's quite overwhelming as well. So let's continue on with the
if you will, the genetic findings, in other words, and to tell people what this flu really is. And I believe it's based on the fact because it has genetically altered bioweapon components, and that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with something. I did a calculation before going on the show with you tonight. We're just talking about the countries that are reporting this flu now. We're talking 100 million people in the population of the 5 to 6 countries that are reporting as it stands now.
And just so we get this clear, we are not talking about the swine flu out there in Eastern Europe. Absolutely. We are talking about some bizarre strain, and we don't even know if it's the flu. It could be any kind of a virus. And isn't there a Russian biotech lab somewhere in that area, Stephen?
Yes, and actually the thing that's really damning, and that's a good word, is the fact that Baxter Pharmaceutical, which has gotten in trouble for supposedly almost releasing a tainted form of vaccine, they were the ones that Joseph Moshe said were basically going to release this. And
So I guess what he's trying to say is try not to get vaccinated because the vaccines are somewhat unreliable. I do agree. I actually do agree that vaccinations are not good for you. I think it's something that you should stay away from. But there's certain things that you can't stay away from, such as chemtrails. You can't really stay away from a lot of things. But that's why I call it very ingenious for population control. It's I think it's affecting every human being on the planet right now. And hopefully people will start to understand the mechanisms for life and death, because it's hitting home for a lot of people around the world.
Eastern Europe. And that takes us to Romania and a fascinating twist on Romania and Bucharest. Now, George, I've talked to people in the different parts of Eastern Europe, literally on the phone, gotten emails from all over there because obviously they're listening to you, they're going to my website. And the commonality, especially in Romania, and I would just put this into perspective, Romania's got one of the most unusual histories of underground tunnels, and where a lot of plague victims died in over the different centuries, and lime was put into the mass graves, and as they started to build an underground railroad and started to dig out foundations, a lot of people were discussing strange anomalies, literally out-of-this-world anomalies. And a friend of mine who is Rick in Romania, and I think I sent you the email that he sent me, was talking about some of the professors of archaeology and history are very troubled because literally the tunnels where a lot of these bodies are being found and a lot of the strange anomalies are taking place is where mythology records that the clash of the Titans, the war of the Titans, the war of the demigods of Greek mythology took place, which will bring us in later into the show into the new events taking place with the giants and the cave demons, which we'll get to. Whoa. That even the animal planet's picking up on. Now, you were fortunate, George, and I was fortunate to have the pilot that flew one of the dead giants out of Afghanistan in 2005 on the show. Yet Animal Planet is carrying a story about 10 Special Forces guys that go into a cave in Afghanistan, and 9 of them are killed, and one of them, whose wife at the moment the battle was going on, had a sense of dread, and they talked about literally giant 9 to 10 foot bat-like creatures, leathery wings, basically faces of women. Now that's just...
So let me get this straight. The Animal Planet is covering 10 Special Forces soldiers going into a cave and finding 9-foot tall bat-like creatures. Well, that all sounds pretty okay, except for the fact that they saw women's faces on them. That would be quite strange.
Straight out of Greek mythology, encountering these individuals, and even showed the bites on one of the men and interviewed the people and gave all their names. So the giants and the cave demons, which we'll get to, whoa, that even the Animal Planet's picking up on. Now, you were fortunate, George, and I was fortunate to have the pilot that flew one of the dead giants out of Afghanistan in 2005 on the show. Yet Animal Planet is carrying a story about 10 Special Forces guys that go into a cave in Afghanistan, and 9 of them are killed, and one of them, whose wife at the moment the battle was going on, had a sense of dread, and they talked about literally giant 9 to 10 foot bat-like creatures, leathery wings, basically faces of women. Now that's just straight out of Greek mythology, encountering these individuals, and even showed the bites on one of the men and interviewed the people and gave all their names. So more and more these things are coming out, but I think it's important to understand that when you tie this stuff together, there is a preternatural, there is a supernatural element of what I call black science. And that black science is being released in the earth today, and I think it behooves everyone to understand this, that there has been no suspension of air flights coming out of that part of Europe, just like when the Spanish flu, i.e.